Fallout 4 is a game that has a multitude of ways to beat it, being that in power armor, with only fists, or a specific gun. But today I ask a question: can you beat Fallout 4 as the Silver Shroud? If somehow you don't know who the Silver Shroud is, he is a comic book hero within the Fallout universe. The rules for today's challenge are simple. 1. I have to use only the Silver Shroud's submachine gun, as it is the Silver Shroud's main weapon. 2. I can only use the Silver Shroud's costume, and it will be my only source of armor throughout the run. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. I start off in Sanctuary and make my character into the Silver Shroud as best as I can. I greet Codsworth, and then proceed to stare down the Vault-Tec rep as I await his arrival to my house.
Good morning! Vault-Tec calling!
And I chose my special stats. I mostly evenly spread out my special stats, as this is my first time going for a specific build run, as in my normal playthroughs I typically go randomly. But I thought I should at least have a high endurance due to the lower armor on the Silver Shroud's costume when I get it. It was then time to sprint to the vault, leaving my wife and infant son behind as I dashed out the door at incredible speed.
Oh my god!
The world then ended. We were frozen in the vault.
Let the boy go. I'm only going to tell you once.
A suspicious man named after a specific cereal brand came and killed my wife and stole my son. My first obstacle in this run was the rad roaches that littered the vault, and as I had no way of killing them, so I just had to run over them and try my best to get out the vault. Well, this was my first time trying to do that, but it was very easy. That due to the doors in the vault, I could very easily close them and hide. Then I hid until they forgot me and I was out of the vault. I could not truly begin the challenge until I gained the Silver Shroud submachine gun and the Silver Shroud costume. So for now, my main objective was to get to Hubris Comics. I did make sure to stop off in Sanctuary and use the I'm Special book for another point in endurance. Then I ran down to stop off at Carla to sell all my worldly possessions to gain as many caps for stim packs and ammo as I possibly could. Also stopping off to help Trudy with Wolfgang and making him run away.
They hear both.
You gotta be kidding me.
Allowing me to sell most of my items to Trudy for stim packs. I then leveled up, putting my first point into toughness. I then had a rather uneventful trip to Hubris Comics, only stopping in Diamond City to gather more stim packs. It was then time to sprint through Hubris Comics, past all the ghouls to the costume and gun. Grabbing the outfit and the gun, I ran to the exit. Unexpectedly to me, all the ghouls followed me up onto the roof. Being surprised by all of them following me up there, I accidentally jumped off the side of the building. After reloading the save, slid down the side of the vent onto the pavement down below. Then I ran as quick as possible away from there. From there I walked down the road to Good Neighbour to meet Kent. Then he stripped me for the suit and immediately gave me it back with the added resistances, along with an added legendary effect that reduces all damage from humans by 15%. That's not going to mean much when fighting Institute Simps, but we will get to that later. I get the Silver Shroud quest, and my first objective is to kill Wayne Delancey. He goes down fairly easily, and I leave the Silver Shroud calling card on his corpse. I then deviate from the Silver Shroud quest completely. Now looking back, I don't really know why I did it in such a weird order throughout my playthrough, but I assure you I will go back to the Silver Shroud quest line. For now I went to go rescue Nick Valentine. The first few triggermen at the entrance to the subway were easy enough to take down, but as I headed deeper into the subway, I ran out of ammo, leaving me with no choice but to gun bash them. This was a very slow and methodical process, as the triggermen and their submachine guns could very easily rip through my armour, and the gun bashing barely did any damage. Eventually, I did make it to the vault. Then I snuck up on Dano, shot him until he was a lifeless corpse laying upon the ground. I saved Nick and we made our way through the vault. I said we, but I mainly was just watching Nick fighting the triggermen as I was very low on ammo. I did pick up the ammo off the corpses though, preserving as much as I could for Skinny Malone. Coming face to face with him, I immediately opened fire, and the fight went surprisingly well, only coming close to death as Darla could stunlock me. finishing off Skinny, I told Nick I would meet him back at Diamond City, which was a lie for the time being. As for now, I made my way to the railroad, as at this point I wanted to side with them, later regretting my decision, but for the time being, I'm over the railroad, spoke to Deacon in order to start the Switchboard quest. I then went back to Diamond City and started the Diamond City Blues quest line, and this does still come into line with the Shroud, as it leads to a drug bust, on which I sell for my own profit, but anyways. I head into the Colonial Tap House, watch Paul get beaten up, and then my game softlocks for a minute as both Paul and Cook stand there without moving. I don't know what made this happen, but there they just stand there doing absolutely nothing, no matter what I do. But nothing happens, so I turn around and leave. Luckily Paul follows me, and I initiate the quest by talking to Paul and helping him talk to Cook. Going back into the tap house, I initiate the dialogue, which allows me to kill. Before he even had a chance to react, I blew his head off with the submachine gun, looting his corpse for his note. I then leave Paul at the crime scene, and I ransack Cook's house for everything that is worth anything. I then go to the drug deal, sneaking up on them, and I open fire, killing Nelson and some of the triggermen, chasing the last one and eventually killing him. Then killing Trish, stealing all 6 boxes of chem for myself. Hoping they would last for a while, I then went back to Diamond City and bought up all the 45 ammo I could find from all the vendors. Then I fast travelled to the Drum and Dimer, bought up as much 45 ammo as Trudy had, then met up with Deacon to start the Railroad's quest line. Speaking of Deacon, we then headed down the sewer system into Slocum Joe's. This is where my main problem about the Railroad quest line came to the forefront. The main Railroad quest had me fighting simps in almost every single scenario. As shown to me by the amount of ammo the simps had me using, this is where I realised it would not be the best idea for me to continue with the Railroad storyline. And also, when I have to destroy the Pridwin, I won't be able to sneak onto it. I won't be changing my armour due to the fact that I have to, for the run I want to keep the Silver Shroud armour on, so that's another reason as to why. We made it to the vault where once again I had to resort to gun bashing. Me thinking I was the best of the best, charged straight into the room full of simps. Trust me, that did not go well. But then I quickly turned and ran. With Deacon shooting, we slowly whittled them down, until it was only the simp leader whom I bashed the circuits out of. I then picked up Dr. Karen's prototype. Deacon gave me something useless, which is great considering I said no, but that's just Bethesda. Should have given the illusion of choice. Then I ran from Slocum Joe's out of the door as fast as I possibly could, fast travelling back to the Old North Church, joining the railroad, and buying even more ammo off Tinker Tom. I then finally went back to Good Neighbour, to continue with the Silver Shroud quest line, listening into the radio and finding out my next target was AJ. Because Kent said he sold chems to kids, I immediately opened fire without question upon him, killing him and his guards with incredible accuracy. I then, instead of continuing, once again, left the quest and went back to Sanctuary to upgrade the Silver Submachine Gun as much as I could. I then went back to Diamond City, sat down for my interview with Nick, explaining in detail my favourite cereal brand. He then had a conniption.
One of the characters. Bald head. Scar across his left eye. Couldn't be. You didn't hear the name Talon called, did you?
No, I don't know why it sounds like that. Nick then took me to Kellogg's house. Not being able to open the door, I then went up and bribed the mayor's assistant for the key, making sure to ignore Piper on the way back. I then searched for Kellogg's house and discussed the findings with Nick, and then showing Dogmeat the findings, and he led the way. Luckily, having played this game multiple times before, I know that Dogmeat ends up at Fort Hagen, so I fast travelled to Cambridge Police Station and began the run. After a fairly uneventful trip, I arrived at Fort Hagen, but Dogmeat was nowhere to be found, so I waited until he was there. I then dismissed him and made my way inside. Luckily, thanking Todd Howard himself, the simps inside the fort at the top do not need to be killed, so I was able to sprint towards the elevator and make my way down, going deeper into the fort, fighting my way through the robust toasters, making sure to loot the key code and get into the armory, as I couldn't pass up all the loot. Now coming face to face with Kellogg, I can say I was not very prepared, as I sprinted straight up to him, opened fire, with Kellogg having 2 simps and a stealth boy made this much harder, but after a few minutes he was finally put down, quite unceremoniously blowing his head off. I collected his brain, then went back to Diamond City to discuss the findings with Nick and Piper. Also by this point I was buying up ammo after everything I did, but I won't include every time I do, as it would bore you. Returning to Good Neighbor, I decided to continue with the Silver Shroud's questline. I won't be deviating from again this time, so I then headed down to talk to Whitechapel Charlie to find out what Kendra's whereabouts. Finding her location, I went and cleared out her raiders and then killed her, and I was called up for a meeting by Hancock, where I spoke to him as the Shroud, and he warned me about St. John. I then headed out to kill Northie and Smiling Kate, first taking care of Smiling Kate and her goons, swift as Kate decided to run into a wall, thanking again Bethesda for their great game mechanics, and moving on to Northie, who took a little more chasing to kill, but they both ended up the same way, riddled with bullet holes, and with the Silver Shroud calling card. Going to the memory den, found that Kent had been kidnapped and St. John had taken him to Milton General Hospital. I then made my way there. Once inside, it was not that hard to kill the raiders, as I stocked up on a lot of 45 ammo at this point. And once coming face to face with a St. John, it only took a bit of convincing for him to not shoot Kent, and I took him down, saving Kent in a heroic display of the Silver Shroud's might. Funnily enough, it was now time for the best part of the game, Kellogg's brain. I then ran through his memories as fast as I could, the important one about the teleportation and Virgil, and now, with no plan in mind, I made a beeline for Virgil's cave in the glowing sea, only stopping to see just how useless my gun was against some red scorpions, that being very useless. Finding Virgil, and the big green man told me I needed to find a Corsa chip, and that could be found at Green Check Genetics. But for now, I postponed that for a while, as I now finally decided to go back on siding with the railroad for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and went to Concord to help out the Minutemen. These were the raiders you are supposed to fight at level 1. They were a pushover, and I got up to Preston with ease, and then went outside to fight the Deathclaw and raiders. Luckily the Brotherhood Knights were there to help me, and the Deathclaw went down with relative ease. I then sent Preston to Sanctuary, helped out Sturges, and began the settlement quest, as most people would say, the most monotonous part of the game. So I won't be explaining everything I did. I'll just have you know I helped out Abernathy Farm, 10 Pines Bluff, which I will talk on, as for some reason they didn't send me to Corvega Plant, but anyways. I also cleared out Starlight Drive-In and helped Grey Garden with their water troubles. Thankfully that was enough to take back the castle. Meeting up with the Minutemen, I can say I was woefully unprepared for this fight. The normal Mirelurks were not that hard to take down, however, but it was the Queen that was a whole nother beast, as my bullets did little to no damage, practically just tickling her, but luckily I could hide within the castle and fire off shots at her, with the Minutemen's help and me shooting through the windows. After a while of this strategy, she came tumbling down, and we had regained the castle. Afterwards, I went off to Green Tech Genetics, knowing exactly where it was. I went straight there, ran past all the gunners, as I could not spare ammo on them. I had to save it all for the fight with the Corsa, making sure to drug up as I took on the Corsa. The fight was much easier than Kellogg, as the Corsa had no backup, and I finished him off with some well-placed shots. I took his chip to the railroad, who had then decoded it for me, got the plans from Virgil, and due to my work with the Minutemen up to this, they helped me construct the teleporter. Thankfully, I somehow had the necessary resources, which surprised me, and I built the teleporter. I teleported into the Institute, got the data for Sturges. Not even giving Father a minute to speak, I shot him in the face, took his clothes, and ran out, making the Institute my enemies. I then headed back to the castle and found Ronnie Shaw waiting for me. I had helped enough settlements for the Old Guns quest to start, now going down into the basement, running into Sarge, who was not too hard to take down at this point, as I could weave in and out of the hallways, and then getting into the armory, finishing off the mission by building artillery, and reporting my success to Press. After helping out even more settlements, which I won't mention, as it is pointless to do so, I could finally begin defending the castle, and I can say with my whole heart that this was the most painful thing I've ever done in a video game ever. Genuinely the most painful thing I have ever done. I could not have been less prepared for what the Institute had to throw at us. The synth onslaught at first. It was not that bad actually. There were not too many synths and they could be easily dealt with. I did set up some turrets, but the synths still overwhelmed me. The Silver Shroud had to unceremoniously dip for more times than I would like to admit, selling everything I could get my hands on more ammo. But eventually, after a while, after repeating this process for over an hour, I finally got it, the nuclear option. I then teleported to CIT and immediately ran down the sewers, ran past all the ghouls and turrets, into the Institute, where I teleported Preston and the gang in. He gave me the detonator, then I just ran all the way through to the main area, fighting through waves of synths until I could get to Father's room, walking past his corpse, which had strangely grown his clothes back, even though I definitely took them from him. But anyway, I went up to his terminal, issued the evacuation order, and disabled the lockdown, and then just sprinted all the way to the reactor, put the charge on, and got teleported to safety. I left fake synth Sean to die, Sturgis teleported us out, and then I blew the Institute sky high, proving you can in fact beat Fallout 4 as a Silver Shroud. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. If you have any suggestions for future runs, leave it in the comments below. This has been General Jupiter. See you in the next video.